Hey everyone, today's video is the fourth in a series on the classes of Diablo 4. In each video, we'll look at the strengths, weaknesses, skills, class-specific mechanics, and different builds for each class, and even rank their builds based on their strength in the end game to help you decide if this is the class you want to play. And next up is the Barbarian. Starting with strengths. The Barbarian has tons of strong AoE options with Upheaval, Hammer of the Ancients, and Iron Maelstrom being some of the strongest abilities the Barbarian has. Barbarian is also one of the tankiest classes in the game with tons of damage reduction options such as Challenging Shout, which taunts nearby enemies and grants 40% damage reduction, Absorption through Iron Skin, which absorbs 50% of your missing life in damage for 5 seconds, and upgrades to provide Fortify, which reduces all damage you take up to 20% of max life, or it can be upgraded to be a self-heal, restoring 10% of the barrier's amount. Not only are there abilities which reduce damage taken, but Barbarians also have an AoE stun called Ground Stomp, which is damage mitigation in the form of stunning all enemies for 3 seconds. There's also Guttural Yell, which causes your shouts to make enemies deal 24% less damage, and there are so many more than this, which is really only scratching the surface. Barbarians also have great mobility with abilities like Rallying Cry, which grants plus 30% move speed and 50% increased resource regeneration and can be upgraded to provide lots of fortified health. There's a status effect called Berserking, which gives 25% increased damage and 30% increased move speed. They also have Leap, which helps get around faster with the skill Enhanced Leap, reducing the cooldown of Leap if it doesn't hit any enemies. And there's also Aspect of Perpetual Stomping, which causes Ground Stomp and Kick to both reset the cooldown of Leap. So lots and lots of ways to keep the Barbarian leaping all over the battlefield. But that's not all. Barbarians also have a skill called Swiftness, which increases movement speed by 12% for 3 skill points, and it's always active, so it's a permanent speed boost. Another active skill called Charge, which rushes the Barbarian forward, and so on. Lots and lots of ways for the Barbarian to move quickly across the battlefield. Barbarians also have the ability to equip more weapons than any other class in the game because of their class-specific mechanic, the Arsenal system, which we'll get into later. And finally, the Barbarian has a ton of slows and stuns, with the skill Hamstring making all bleeding effects slow enemies by 30%. There's Kick, Ground Stomp, and Enhanced Upheaval, all having the ability to stun enemies. Now when it comes to weaknesses, honestly, there isn't anything glaring. If you consider having to get close to your enemy to attack, that could count, or maybe the fact that there are just so many good skills available to the Barbarian and different weapons to choose from that it could be difficult to know which one is best. Barbarian, in my opinion, is looking like one of the most polished classes so far in Diablo 4, having a complete toolkit. They have the strong AoE damage, they have powerful defensives, and they have great mobility. The only weakness, if you could call it that, would be building your character correctly in order to clear the endgame content, which we'll get to later. Alright, moving on to skills. Barbarians have 6 skill groups: Basic, Core, Defensive, Brawling, Weapon Mastery, and Ultimate. Each tier is unlocked after a certain level is reached. For example, Core skills are unlocked at level 3, Defensive at level 7, Brawling at 12, Weapon Mastery at 17, and Ultimate at level 24, so you will be able to test out Barbarian Ultimate abilities in the upcoming open beta. Some cool looking skills include Double Swing, which sweeps both weapons from opposite directions, damaging enemies caught in the center with both weapons, Call of the Ancients, which calls the Barbarian Ancients from Diablo 2 to aid you in battle, which is Corlic leaping at enemies and using Frenzy, Talic using Whirlwind, and Madoc using Upheaval. I also think Iron Maelstrom looks amazing. The Barbarian attaches a chain to each of his different weapons and swings them around him in a massive AoE, which does tons of damage. And because of the Arsenal system, the Barbarian has 2 additional weapons over other classes, which we're going to get into next. But before that, if you're enjoying the video, make the Barbarian smile by clicking like and subscribe. Alright, moving on to class-specific mechanics. The Barbarian's class mechanic is the Arsenal system. The Arsenal system allows access to 2 extra weapon slots, allowing the Barbarian to have a total of 4 weapons equipped: 2 one-handed weapons and 2 two-handed weapons. Even though the Barbarian can only use 1 two-handed weapon or the 2 one-handed weapons at any given time, the Arsenal system gives Barbarian the most equipment customization out of any class in the game. Now within the Barbarian skill set, certain skills require a specific specific type of weapon. For example, a bludgeoning weapon, such as a mace, or a slashing weapon, such as a sword. Certain skills may also require the weapon to be a two-handed weapon, or require dual wielding those two one-handed weapons. Luckily, when the Barbarian uses a given skill, the appropriate weapon will automatically equip. This is a helpful feature to make playing the Barbarian less complex and more casual friendly, instead of constantly having to open your inventory and switching out your weapons manually each time you wanted to use a specific skill. The arsenal system also has additional customization with the ability to choose which weapon expertise to level up, whether it's your slashing weapons or your bludgeoning weapons, and there's also a feature called technique, but that feature was not usable in the last playable build of Diablo 4, so there's not much we know about it. Alright, moving on to builds. The main themes are bleeds, which use skills like flay, rend, rupture, Iron Maelstrom, and gushing wounds. Berserking, which comes on skills like frenzy, double swing, steel grasp, wrath of the berserker, and unconstrained. And stuns, which can be found on skills like bash, upheaval, ground stomp, concussion, wallop, and Iron Maelstrom. Now, when it comes to endgame, the best endgame build is Upheaval Barbarian. That's right, Upheaval does a massive amount of damage, 73%, and it deals it in a frontal AoE. There are powerful upgrades for the skill which give it a 20% chance to stun all enemies it damages for 2.5 seconds, and Furious Upheaval, which makes your next upheaval deal up to 80 increased damage. There's also a capstone skill called Unbridled Rage, which causes your core skills to deal 135 increased damage but cost more fury. Basically, this build is focused on making Upheaval do as much damage as it possibly can, and it can get really strong. Ground Stomp does an AoE stun and can be upgraded to reduce the cooldown of your ultimate skill by 1 second for each enemy damaged by Ground Stomp, but also, because all the enemies are stunned, Wallop increases damage to stunned enemies, and Concussion increases your chance for your bludgeoning skills to stun. Now, that ultimate ability on this build is Iron Maelstrom, which does massive AoE in addition to stunning enemies, and stuns are always great, and the AoE capacity of Upheaval is unmatched. Now, as you probably noticed if you've seen some of the other class videos, a lot of the builds are focused on reducing the cooldown of your ultimate ability. This seems like a trend in Diablo 4 that many builds want to get that, and the ultimate ability is just really strong. Now, if I were to rank the strongest builds in the game across all classes right now, I would say Bone Necromancer would get number 1 because of its crazy damage and survivability. I would give Upheaval Barb number 2 because after maxing out Upheaval's damage, the build gets powerful defensive abilities to round out the build, like Challenging Shout, Thick Skin, and Combat Frenzy, which just really makes the build very tanky and still dealing a lot of damage. And this was the best endgame build for Barbarian that could clear any nightmare dungeon. As of the closed beta, it seems like each class only had one build that could clear any content in the game, and Barbarian's build was Upheaval. Keeping in mind though, this is all based on data available from the closed beta test and information online, and there will most likely be changes before the final game releases. Now, that's all I have for Barbarian. If you enjoyed this video, you might like the video shown on the screen. I'll see you there.